listen to the silence of space. Tonight, we will fall asleep to stories about the space station and those who work there. Just close your eyes and let the voices from NASA take you to the stars.
Houston, we have a podcast. Welcome to the official podcast of the NASA Johnson Space Center, Episode 3, Landing from Space. I'm Gary Jordan, and I'll be your host today. So on this podcast, we bring in the experts, NASA scientists, engineers, astronauts, pretty much all the folks that have the coolest information, the stuff you really want to know, right on the show to tell you about everything NASA, everything from extraterrestrial dirt to the unknown parts of the universe. So today, we're talking landing from space with Dr. John Charles. He's the chief scientist for the NASA Human Research Program here at the NASA Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. And we talked about the more human side of space, specifically what happens to the human body in the microgravity environment and what that means for adjusting to life back on Earth, even on other planets like Mars. I also had the chance to catch NASA astronaut Shane Kimbrough just 2 days after landing from a 173-day mission aboard the International Space Station, and he gave a first-hand experience of what it feels like to adjust back to Earth's environment after living in space for that long. So with no further delay, let's go light speed and jump right ahead to our talk with Dr. John Charles, and then NASA astronaut Shane Kimbrough. Enjoy.
T-minus 5 seconds and counting. Mark. All launch commit lights are correct. There she goes.
Houston, we have a podcast.
All right, Dr. Charles, welcome. Should I say Dr. Charles or John?
Copy, John.
John, okay. All right, well, John, thanks for coming on the show. We always seem to end up in the same circles, first with the landing on Mars video and with speaking presentations, and, you were the first person I thought of when we had this topic. But what's cool about this one is, for this particular podcast, I actually got a chance to talk to Shane Kimbrough 2 days after he landed, which was awesome. I mean, he was really tired, but it was pretty cool to talk to him. Not to say that you're not a special guest, but
I'll try not to be as tired as he was.
Well, we're doing this at I guess after lunchtime, so I can understand.
That's possible.
It is.
Yeah.
But what's cool is that he was just getting adjusted to Earth. It was perspective of such a unique perspective. He just came down, and he was still getting adjusted, and that takes weeks, right?
It may take. Well, some folks say it takes as long to adjust back to Earth as it did in flight. So there is going to be ongoing adjustments, especially in the areas of, say, the bone loss, that will take months and months and months before they even come back to what they were approximately before flight.
Yeah, I mean, even some astronauts say they still have dreams about floating. I mean, even floating, and they kind of, I guess their body just doesn't know where they are. It
is certainly a monumental experience, and I cannot imagine ever getting tired of it or used to it. I understand Peggy Whitson was excited to get the mission extension of 3 more months.
Right.
And she said she was actually interested in going back again. So I think once you've experienced the wonders of weightlessness and the awesome view out the window and all the other parts of going on a space flight these days, it's not something you ever get used to, and it probably colors your dreams for many, many years to come.
That's a beautifully put way, a beautiful way of saying it. But that's what I guess, at least for Shane Kimbrough is kind of, I guess, happy to be home. When we were interviewing him, his wife was not too far away, so it was, I'm sure he's happy to see his family.
Sure.
But I was thinking, why don't we start off with that conversation with Shane Kimbrough, because he does talk about a lot of the human aspects, and he just says, I'm dizzy and this is how I'm feeling. So I thought it would be cool if we kind of elaborated on that a little bit after. But first, let's start with Shane Kimbrough's interview. We do have to go back in time, so producer Alex, let's cue the wormhole sound effect thingy. So if you need to take a breather, let me know, because it's just like talking and then talking and then talking.
Let's knock it out.
Oh man.
Cool.
So wow. Okay. I know it's been a busy couple of days for you, but thanks for taking the time to actually set 10 minutes aside to have this conversation. You just landed 2 days ago. That's pretty crazy. But since we only do have like a short period of time, I thought we'd start, and if you could just kind of take us through the journey of starting at when you were saying your final goodbyes to Peggy and Thomas and Oleg, and then you just closed the hatch, and then that journey all the way to where you, bam, smacked the ground.
All right. Yeah, it was an anticipated moment when we were going to say goodbyes. We'd kind of been sitting around for about an hour waiting on the time when Sergei, the Soyuz commander, came and said, it's time to go. So we did say our goodbyes. We gave hugs to all the other crew members we were leaving, like you said, Peggy and Thomas and Oleg. We spent about 4.5 months together with them, so we spent a lot of time together. So we got to be really good friends and crewmates. So it was great with them, but it was, we were heading home, and so we had to say our goodbyes. Quickly shut the hatch right after we said goodbyes, and then we started preparing our vehicle with leak checks and everything, trying to make sure we were leak tight before we departed from the space station.
So a lot of right to the procedures, right? Not a lot of reflection.
Absolutely,
time,
we didn't have
right
any time to mess around because we do a leak check, then we get in our spacesuits, and then we get in the descent module, close the hatch to the other module, and then we depart pretty quickly. So all that happened, by the procedure. If we had any hiccup in that, then we wouldn't have been leaving that day. So it's pretty pressure packed trying to get to the undocking time. And so we undock, and then after you undock, you have about an hour and a half, which is an entire revolution around the Earth, to really not do much. So we took a little nap because we were really tired. I mean, they had us on a crazy sleep shift on the last day, and so we were pretty worn out. So we took a little nap, and then got ready after that for the deorbit burn, which is a pretty big emotional event when the big engine fires off and puts you on a trajectory to enter the Earth's atmosphere at the correct angle, so that you actually make the landing site and make sure the vehicle's pointing in the right direction so you don't burn up when you're coming through the atmosphere. So that's obviously a plus.
So you didn't really feel the deorbit burn, right? You mainly felt the re-entry? Is that what it was?
You do feel the deorbit burn because the engine kicks in, and it's kind of like a kick in the pants, and you're thrown back in your seat.
Oh, wow.
And it lasts, I think, about a couple minutes. So it's a sustained kind of pulse, and
you feel it that whole time, right?
Yeah, you're feeling it. I mean, initially you feel it a little more, and then you get used to it.
Right.
And so then you're kind of getting ready to come back through the atmosphere. Then separation of the descent module and the BAO, the habitation compartment, happens. That's kind of like just an explosion, right? So you feel it, you hear it, you see things flying by the windows from the other module that just came apart. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, not a boring ride.
No, not a boring ride. And then we're kind of getting ready for the next big event. There's always 4 or 5 big events along the way. The next one was parachute opening, of course, after you started feeling the effects of gravity. All right, so we ended up pulling them 4.3 Gs, I think. So
Whoa.
We felt like 4.3 times your body weight, which after microgravity felt like about 20 times your body weight.
Yeah.
And so that built up, and we kind of just felt it building. We were watching the meter go up, and man, I was like, wow, that's a lot. And then right after that, the parachute, started coming out, and that was really an emotional event because it's really dynamic, I guess is the best word. And it kind of throws you around really drastically 4 or 5 times, and it's completely normal. But until you go through it the first time, which is my first experience, I was like, there's no way this can be normal. But it is, and that's the way they do it. And it's just the parachute coming out and then getting set up and the risers getting in the right position. And then once that's done, and then it's kind of a peaceful ride until you crush into the ground.
Yeah. Okay, so the swinging back and forth, how would you compare that? I'm thinking of amusement park ride, but it's got to be more intense than that, right?
It is, but I don't know if there's one out there that just really slams you to the right and slams you to the left, and you do that 5 or 6 times, in a I can't think of one that does that, but that's what it was like. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I guess that's why they kind of strap you into that thing real tight, right? Because you're getting bounced and kicked and like all
exactly.
directions.
Yeah. So as we coming in, the advice I got was, as soon as you start feeling the G-force, start pulling on your straps as much as you can to really get you down into that seat.
Yeah.
So that you're not just secured, but getting ready for the impact of the landing as well.
So is it fair to say that landing was the hardest impact, probably?
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. No doubt.
How did that feel?
It was, I've heard it called it's like a really bad car crash, and now I can confirm that is accurate.
Wow.
So you hit just really hard, and in our case, we hit twice really hard. So,
and then you roll around.
And then we
right?
rolled some more too, just for added effects.
And then you said, I remember you saying, because we did like a bunch of other events before this, but you said like you were in a position where you were just kind of dangling.
Yeah, so I was
right?
kind of on top, looking down at the ground, but
Yeah.
in that case, I was hanging from my straps.
Wow.
Really uncomfortable feeling for about about 5 to 10 minutes until they could get there and roll the vehicle kind of to the normal position.
Oh, that's it. Just 5 to 10 minutes, and then they were there.
Yeah, it was very lucky. We had perfect weather that day. The search and rescue forces saw us the whole time. Really, right after the parachute opened, they tracked us all the way to the ground. So they were right there in about 10 minutes and got us out pretty quickly.
So when that door opened and they pulled you out, what was that feeling? Was it relief, or was it just more of the, just here's the next step kind of thing, or describe those emotions?
Yeah, so they opened the hatch, the search and rescue forces, and they're familiar faces from our training in Star City, Russia. I mean, they're Russian folks, but it's just nice to see their smiling faces. And then I saw my flight surgeon from NASA and the chief astronaut, Chris Cassidy, right there as well. So, we were all smiles and waving. We all felt great at the time. And getting out is very challenging because it is so small, like we were talking about earlier.
Right.
But they have to help you out. You can't get out on your own for gravity, for one, and then it's just too tight and too small. You can't even really get to unstrap yourself. They have to get in there. It's that tight.
Wow.
Like you can't move your hands enough to unstrap most of your straps, so they get in there and help you out. Doing that as well as pulling you out of the vehicle. Yeah.
So, okay, when you first, you're pulled out of the capsule, you have fresh air, familiar faces. Obviously, that's a great moment. But so now you're back on Earth. You can feel it, right? How are you feeling? Do you feel sick? Is it mostly happy? Is there overwhelming feelings? What's going on?
I think people have felt all those things you mentioned. I really felt great. I loved smelling that fresh desert air. It was kind of like a 60-degree day in Kazakhstan. Just beautiful. The wind was blowing. It was just awesome to have that sensation of nature again for me. And then just seeing friendly faces and knowing I was going to get to talk to my family pretty soon after that was pretty special.
Yeah, that's amazing. What was the main thing you noticed about the way your body was adjusting to life back on Earth?
Well, to not move your head around is great advice I got, because that really provokes some folks to get sick. So I really try to keep my head focused straight ahead. If anybody was talking to me, I would make them come right in front of me. So I didn't have to because the natural tendency is to just look at them, right? But that really gets your inner ear spinning up pretty well. And
that must have been hard because there's a lot happening, right? People are all over. Yeah.
So I heard people to my side, and I just told them, hey, come right in front of me so I can see you, because I'm not going to turn my head.
Yeah, exactly.
And it seemed to pay off. So
yeah. Well, okay. So besides feeling sick, were you weak? Or can you move around, or what was?
You can move around a little bit.
Okay.
They were carrying us. I wasn't walking anywhere at the time. And they had people that carried us to where we were sitting there for a while. And then after that, they carried us to the medical tent. But once we got in there, then it was a bunch of testing and walking and with your eyes closed and open and just crazy things. And, just trying to see where you were at.
You just don't get a break. And then they throw you on, take you a helicopter and then a helicopter to a plane. You're off to Houston.
Exactly.
I'm guessing you slept on the plane, right?
I did. Slept really well on the plane, so that was good.
I probably should have started off with this. I just realized. But how are you feeling now?
I'm feeling really well compared to what I thought I'd be feeling at this point. It's only 2 days after I landed, like you mentioned earlier, and I really feel great. I had a great workout today, which I think really made me feel better.
Oh, wow. You're right back into it.
Yeah, so we got about a 45-day program of working out and getting you rehabilitated back to your full strength.
Okay.
It should only take maybe a week or so to get there, and then from there we'll just build on whatever strength I have.
All right. Well, one more question, and then I'll let you go. What was the first thing you ate when you got back there?
A lot of people are asking me that, and it's a really boring answer, but it was a banana, because that's something I hadn't had in a while. I was really wanting some fruit.
That's true. It's not yet.
I had a banana and an apple, and had a bunch of those on the plane.
Okay, so how about this? Once you're well enough, what's the first thing you're going to eat?
I think we're going to do some Italian tonight, which I've been thinking about, so that's good. And then the Mexican probably here in the next few days as well.
All right. Definitely two good ones. Well, Shane, thank you for spending this couple minutes with me.
My pleasure. Thanks, Gary.
Cool. All right, producer Alex, we're going to have to work on that wormhole sound effect. Come on. That was quite a ride. I mean, I honestly felt sick just listening to the way that he was going down. But there was a lot going on for every step of the way. So, first off, what are those changes that he was talking about that makes him feel so off when he lands on the ground?
The human body goes through many changes in weightlessness and the rest of spaceflight. I'm always interested most in weightlessness. I don't like the term microgravity. I think that's unnecessarily accurate.
There's a lot of syllables too.
Yeah, a lot of syllables too. The weightlessness has profound effects, and I like to say that it's evolutionarily unanticipated. There's nothing that has ever happened to us in our lives and in all of the lives of everybody that lived before us, all the way back to as far as you want to go, that is weightlessness. Now, even floating in water is not weightlessness because you're still subject to gravity. The parts of your body that are denser go to the bottom, and the parts of your body that are lighter float to the top, and that's true even in the vestibular system, the organs of balance he was talking about, being dizzy. Those are not weightless even underwater. The only time they're weightless is if you fall off a cliff, and then the effect is very short-lived.
Right.
You don't get a chance to enjoy it very much.
Right.
So this is a real opportunity for the body to experience something that it's never experienced before, ever. And not surprisingly, there are changes that occur in the body, and the changes might be summarized by the concept that the body economizes its metabolic energy. It doesn't waste energy supporting metabolic processes it doesn't think it needs. And you can't tell your body, hang on to that because you're going to need it eventually. The body doesn't talk to you in that sense. The body responds, and by this I mean the autonomic processes, the physiological processes, respond to the environment that they have seen recently and are seeing at the moment. So as far as the body is concerned, gravity went away and it's never coming back. And so what do I need to do to be more effective metabolically in the environment that I will see forever?
It's just the body adapting to a new environment.
To a new environment. And luckily, the body adapts nicely to the weightless environment,
right,
because it really is sort of a step down. It's less hard to do almost everything metabolically in weightlessness. And the body doesn't know that you're going back to Earth with gravity. So you have to fool the body to get ready to go back to Earth. So you go through the changes of weightlessness and these metabolic efficiencies I'm talking about include not maintaining bone strength. You don't need bone strength in weightlessness. And the body says, great, I'm not going to spend metabolic energy on that anymore. I'm going to dedicate it to something else.
Right.
You don't need muscle strength. You don't need cardiovascular strength so much. You don't need all the intricate understanding of how to respond to gravity. You don't need to keep track of where all your joints are, your limbs, and all that kind of stuff.
All that is gone in the weightless environment.
That's right.
It's just you don't need your bones because you're not pressed up against anything. You're
not supporting yourself anymore.
Right.
There is a residual bone strength, a residual bone volume or density that you will probably plateau at. If you stay in space forever, you will never become like the guys were in Wall-E when they had no bones, the big blobs of jelly.
That's right.
That would never happen. You probably, based on other studies and clinical experience, you probably lose up to 40% of your bone mass eventually. That is after years and years and years.
Wow.
So
is this saying that you're not working out during those years?
Yeah, assuming you're just weightless.
Assuming you're just
weightless and not working out. That's right.
Okay.
Which would be, I think, my preferred lifestyle. I'd like to be weightless and not working out. But Gary, that's the answer, though, is the way we fool the body or don't fool the body. We just change the conditions is by working out. So the astronauts work out 2 hours a day, every day, including resistive exercise. My favorite, I call that weightlifting and weightlessness.
Right.
And it's all done with hydraulics and computers. And then aerobic training, exercising on treadmills and bicycles and maybe a rowing machine someday. And what that does is put a load on the bones and the muscles and the cardiovascular system, not the vestibular system, not the organs of balance, but all the other systems mimicking the absence or the effect of gravity, which is then absent in that environment.
So that's so they're doing those. You said aerobic and resistive. So that's like you said, in space, the weightlifting machine,
right,
sort of with hydraulics, and that simulates weightlifting. And then you also have aerobic exercise, which is the treadmill and the bicycle. So you have to do this, I believe, 2.5 hours every single day in order to maintain everything. And
that's a total of 2+ hours a day. That includes breakdown and setup and changing your clothes and all that stuff. So you do, multiple tens of minutes at each.
I see.
And different exercises on different days. And I think one day is actually a free form. You can do whatever you want, but the other days are fairly prescribed. But what that does is put a load on the bones and the muscles and the cardiovascular system and other organs as if they were doing something against gravity. It's not the same, but it's close.
So that's the way that you're saying you're tricking your body into thinking that, you still need to maintain the muscles. Hold on, stop.
You're maintaining them for something else. You're maintaining them for exercise and not for fighting against gravity.
Right.
But it has the beneficial effect in many cases of being appropriate for gravity. And in fact, the resistive exercises that we're doing now seem to minimize the loss of bone structure that occurs in weightlessness that has been seen on previous missions.
Mm-hmm.
So the Advanced Resistive Exercise Device, the ARED, may well be the way that we protect bones and muscles in the future on Mars missions. It may be that we're able to go on really long missions without losing much calcium and without changing the structure of very much of the bones. And it's not the loss of calcium per se that's the problem, it's where the calcium comes out of. The bones are developed in everybody whilst you're growing up.
Right.
When you're growing up, you're born with a skeleton, and then you spend the first 18 years of your life banging yourself around and jumping up in trees and off of hillsides and falling and jumping and running and pulling and lifting and all that stuff shapes your body.
Childhood.
Right, and that's what I saw people do it. Like I said, see previous comment.
Right.
But that shapes your body and gives you the structure you need to keep doing that for the rest of your life. And then at some point, that those structures, those facets are completed, and you can then go and do useful things with the body that you've built up over the first 18 plus years of your life.
Right.
So when you go into weightlessness, you start eating away at that in the absence of gravity. And if you come back to the Earth, you restore some of that, but you don't restore it the way it was originally. You restore it to the way it needs to be now, which means you don't go back inside the bones and reestablish the framework, the structure. And the bones actually have structure inside of them. The outside is called the cortex, and it's a thick layer. And then on the inside are the trabeculae, and the trabeculae are like a framework. Think of a lattice work inside of your bones, and that lattice work is genetically engineered by you as you grow up to respond to the forces you're putting on bones. So it puts down calcium where the forces are the greatest, and it doesn't put down calcium where the forces are not the greatest. But that's the structure you take with you for the remainder of your active life, unless you go into weightlessness, in which case that all sort of gets eroded gradually but persistently over the time in weightlessness. So your bones actually do lose calcium, you do lose mass, bone mass, and you lose strength of the bones. Not enough to cause you to fracture when you come back to the ground. There have been a couple of astronauts who have fractured bones in the post-flight period, and we have analyzed those, and they would have fractured their bones if they had never flown in space. They just caused an impact that broke bones, and that's just what happens.
They were trying to run up and down trees like their childhood days, right?
Yeah, nothing quite so glamorous. One guy fell off of a stage after a public affairs presentation. He didn't fall off, he tripped because there was something on the edge of the stage. So it was unavoidable whether he was an astronaut or not, and whether he'd flown in space or not.
Right.
So we don't see bone breaking episodes in astronauts that would not have broken their bones beforehand, but there's the risk that with even longer flights, longer than 6 months like Shane was on, and longer than 1 year like Scott Kelly and Mikhail Kornienko were on, and perhaps 2.5 year Mars missions might be getting close to the threshold where you might start seeing a slight increased possibility of breaking bones under normal circumstances. Not during the mission, but after the mission, when you're back on the Earth. That's sort of after 30 months, that's when you start getting close to that threshold.
So it has to do with the time that you're in the weightless
It seems to be an ongoing process. And like I say, though, that process seems to be interrupted by the heavy resistive exercise.
Right.
So that sort of stretches that period out. So you're not at risk if you keep doing your heavy resistive exercise. But that's an interesting question, too. And you haven't asked me that one yet, but I'll go ahead and answer it.
You were just reading my mind.
Yeah, that is, are we going to do resistive exercise on the Mars missions? And the answer is, I hope so.
Right.
But we probably will not be using the ARED. The ARED is a very large device that takes up an entire module on the space station. It's a node, that's a module. And we probably will not have that kind of real estate, that kind of volume available for that kind of device. So right now what the Human Research Program is doing is trying to understand which of the exercises on the ARED are the most effective in protecting which of the bone facets that are important to protect, and then building a smaller device that'll just do those, a tailored, specialized device. So this is maybe an important point to make, and that is astronauts will go on missions and will suffer deficits that we know how to protect against, because we can't afford to protect against them within the limited constraints of a spaceship. So we will give them a device that gives them certain exercise capabilities to protect them against deficits that we think are the most important. But we may be allowing the rest of other aspects of that, say the other aspects of the skeleton, to go ahead and atrophy just because we don't have the flexibility and the resources to protect them against that. We don't think that's going to put them at an increased risk because they're not going to be doing things that will need those aspects of the skeleton, for example.
Right, so you've prioritized it.
We had to prioritize lots and lots of things when we start talking about a Mars mission.
Right, yeah. No,
and I knew we wanted to talk about a Mars mission, because that's the only thing you talked to me about ever.
Well, we were getting there. I was
Yeah.
taking baby steps, though.
Yeah.
You just jumped right there.
I did.
I guess, so how would the exercises, since we are on Mars now, how would the exercise work on Mars? You know, if you're talking about landing on, would you kind of use sort of the same thing, or can you afford a different type of exercise?
Well, it's going to have to be tailored for the Mars environment, and for the Mars environment means both exercising at 1/3 of a G, or 38% of Earth's normal gravity, we call it 1/3 of a G, on Mars, and also being appropriate for the spacecraft that will land on Mars. And you raised a very important question. I hope you realized you raised it, because it's an important question.
Everything
That
is intentional.
it's a matter of economics to get to Mars. First, you got to build a spaceship, and then you got to send it there with fuel. And fuel is the coin of the realm in space. It takes lots and lots and lots and lots of fuel to get any place, and if you get there, then it takes even more fuel to slow you down and land safely. So everything on the surface of Mars will be mass constrained and volume constrained, because volume requires mass. You know, if you build a small room, it's got less mass than a big room. So we are going to be focusing on not only what we can put into the Mars transit vehicle, which will be constrained by the volume of the vehicle, but also what we can land on Mars, which will be constrained by the volume of the lander and the mass capable of landing. So it may well be that we hope we figure out a way to use that 1/3 of a G on Mars as a way to supplement some of the exercise that they would normally be doing in their mini gym inside the Mars lander or the Mars habitat.
Right. So when you're thinking about a Mars mission, it kind of goes back to that idea of prioritizing, right? So just as you're going to prioritize which parts of the body are the most sensitive, the most important for you to maintain, when you're sending stuff to Mars, you got to prioritize which things are the most important things to bring, to send, and make sure they're really small and light and don't take up a lot of space.
Small and light, and don't take up a lot of space, and don't take a lot of energy, don't take a lot of mass, power, volume, which are the important constraints of a spaceship. And just think, we started talking about this because I was trying to make the point that Shane's body is not back to normal yet. His bones are going to take months to get back to normal, but other organ systems may respond more quickly.
But they will get back to normal?
See, here's a metaphysical question. What does normal mean in a case like this? Because your bone changes normally over the course of your lifetime, including over every 6 months. You know, he was gone for 6 months. His bone was going to be atrophying a little bit anyhow.
Right.
So we're not going to get him back to what he was before flight. And why would we? Because he wouldn't be at that condition now after his landing if he'd just been walking around the Earth for 6 months. Our goal is to get him back to where they need to be to live a full, happy, functional life here on Earth. But you can't go home again. You can't go back to your old skeleton again. Things are different with time in life, and that's doubly true for time spent in space.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter. You're always just gonna get older. Time's just gonna go forward.
That's right.
But I guess bones are not the only thing you have to think about, right? You have to think about a lot of other things. Shane mentioned, when he landed and they pulled him out, he couldn't even turn his head. He was extremely dizzy.
And see, I think this is the other extreme. The bones are some of the slowest to respond in spaceflight, and some of the slowest to respond post-flight during the recovery back on Earth. But the vestibular system is probably the fastest responder. The vestibular system is the organ system of balance, and it allows us to stay upright. We are constantly making adjustments in our bones and our muscles and the way they're lining us up. I mean, the old illustration is, imagine balancing a broomstick. Remember broomsticks? We used to have brooms and broomsticks, and imagine balancing a broomstick upright on the palm of your hand, and all the adjustments you have to make to keep that upright.
Right.
That's how it is when you're walking. When you're walking and standing on one foot or even standing on 2 feet, your body is constantly adjusting its center of balance and its center of mass to stay over the center of pressure of the feet so you can stay upright. And that all requires sensors in the skin, sensors in the soles of the feet, sensors that detect the angles between the ankle and the shin bone and all the other bones, and the organs of balance inside the inner ear. And Gary, even though we're on a podcast, I am automatically pointing at my ears because the organs of balance are behind the inner ears.
I can see.
Yeah.
But I guess no one else can.
Nobody else can. But this organ system is exquisitely tuned to respond to motion and to respond to gravity. There are parts of it that detect how you move your head, and now I'm twisting my head left and right because that causes a sensation in my inner ear, which then is in the most simple case is translated to my eyeballs, so my eyes counteract the motion of my head so I can keep continuing to look at you while we're talking. But there are other organs that detect my tilting my head left and right, and those are the balance. Those are the otoliths. The other ones are the semicircular canals. But the otoliths, the otolith is ear stone, otolith.
Okay.
And those are little stones inside little sacs of fluid inside your head, which detect which way down is. And those are the ones that are the most immediately affected by spaceflight and weightlessness, because if your whole existence is predicated on detecting down, and somebody takes away down, then what do? And that's sort of how the vestibular system responds to weightlessness. Is it spends a lot of time, the first several hours or several days, saying, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God! My only job is to detect down, and there is no down. What do I do now?" And I'm built. The organs of balance are built to detect motion and to detect directions of acceleration. So they may get more sensitive. In fact, the little otoliths in your ears might become bigger. They might accrete more of the mineral that they're made of because they're sure there's a down there someplace, and if they could only get heavier, they might be able to detect it again.
And this is over the first couple days?
It's over the course of the space flight. Over the course of the space flight. Over the course of the first few days. Thank you for bringing me back to the point at hand. Over the course of the first few days, essentially the brain says, you know what, you guys are just making gibberish, you're not making any sense anymore, I'm going to start ignoring you. Now, the brain doesn't actually use words. It just sort of economizes the metabolic energy. It says, I'm not going to put so much metabolic energy into the nerves that come from the vestibular system because I'm just getting gibberish from there, and it makes the stomach part of me sick. Let's just not pay attention so much to that anymore. And in fact, on Skylab, the American space station in the 1970s, when there was a rotating chair on board specifically to see how often we could make astronauts sick in spaceflight. Rotating chairs are good ways to make people sick. If you rotate them and ask them to move their heads while they're rotating, that's a great way to be sick.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Turns out
those
after a few days in weightlessness, astronauts couldn't be made sick anymore by moving their heads while they were rotating because the organs of balance had adapted, and also because the stimuli were different.
I've seen that video of Tim Peake where I think it was Tim Peake and Tim Kopra when they were both on the International Space Station. Yeah. Kopra took Peake and just spun around really fast and then stopped him suddenly. And Peake had like one moment where he stopped suddenly where, the whole time he was spinning, he didn't feel a thing. Yeah. And then he stopped suddenly. He's like, okay, I'm dizzy for a second. And now he's good.
It's gone.
Yeah.
So there are quick responses. But as I say, the organs of balance, the vestibular system, continue to like I say, try to find gravity, and so they may actually increase the mass of the little stones inside your inner ears. And that's kind of an interesting novelty that nobody's really figured out yet what the operational, I should say, significance. Functionally, we know what it means, but operationally, what does it mean in terms of your ability to stand upright after you land on Mars or things like that? So there's lots of research, lots of topics for research that we can do in that domain. But the point I was trying to make originally is that this is a quick responding organ system. Then slightly slower will be the organs of your cardiovascular system. And those are all fluid-based in the sense that you're a big pressurized bag of fluid. Nothing personal, but all of us are. and our goal is to stay pressurized by the function of our heart, so the blood can then perfuse the brain, and also the blood pressure we carry around with us, 120/80. When the doctor does your blood pressure, It tells you, yeah, it's 120 over 80.
That's a good one.
That's the pressure that you need to get through the muscles when you're exercising. When your muscles are exercising, they're constricting, they're contracting, they're squeezing down the blood vessels. It takes a certain amount of blood pressure to push through there to deliver the nutrients that the muscles need to continue exercising. That's where your 120 over 80 comes from. And you have to continue building that pressure up. But in weightlessness, you're not exercising so much anymore. You're floating freely, you're relaxing, and your blood vessels are dilating, and your pressure, you'd actually lose blood volume in space. You may lose about 1 liter of blood in space. So you may actually lose, that's about a blood donation, about the same amount as they take out of you when you donate blood, half a liter or 1 liter.
Huh.
And that's because the fluid distribution builds into it an assumption that a lot of your fluid is going to be down in your lower limbs because of gravity, and your lower limbs have a lot of veins, which are very floppy and good places to sequester extra fluid that you don't need, extra blood you don't need. And in weightlessness, that fluid is all shifted into the upward direction. And there's not a lot of extra venous volume in the upper part of the body, and so the body says, aha, I've got too much fluid on board. I know what to do in a case like this. Decrease thirst, increase urination, eliminate fluid elsewhere, shift it to other parts of the body, which has the effect of causing your body to lose blood volume over the course of the first few weeks in space flight.
That was going to be my question.
Yeah.
Where does that liter go?
That liter goes out, it becomes tomorrow's coffee. If you remember the old analogy about the water recycling system.
That's right.
So that fluid volume is appropriate for your time in weightlessness. And again, one of those tricks that you pull in your body is that you come back to the Earth after your time in weightlessness, and suddenly that fluid drains back down to the lower part of the body. And then suddenly the upper part of the body is volume deprived, and that's when you may feel a little bit lightheaded, a little bit weak. Astronauts wear compression garments on the lower body, on the legs especially, to squeeze, to make sure the fluid stays up in the upper part of the body and not pooling in the lower part of the body. Shane was wearing those compression garments. They're called kentaver garments. That's a Russian name for kentaver.
Nice translation.
Yeah, I'm good at that. But those are very effective techniques, and we have other capabilities like that as well. But the point is, while he wasn't being sensitive to emotion by not turning his head very much, his body was functioning to keep the blood flowing to the upper part of his body through his brain, so he could continue to function normally, and that's all part of the early readaptation process as well.
That's right.
So the vestibular system was quick responding, the cardiovascular system is slightly slower. Along the way, you lose muscle mass because you're not hefting your body mass around, and they have to rebuild that when you come back. And then out there at the sort of the tail end is your skeleton. What we haven't talked about before yet, though, are things like your radiation tolerance, or radiation exposure, I should say.
That's right.
That doesn't plateau, that doesn't decrease, that doesn't accommodate, because you keep getting exposed to radiation, and radiation has a cumulative effect.
As long as you're in
space flight. So that's an ongoing issue, and that's something we will have to deal with going to Mars, because you're exposed to even more radiation when you leave Earth's magnetic field and are exposed to the deep space radiation. And then the other aspects, of course, are the psychological aspects of spaceflight. And if you think what I've described to you before is complicated, you ain't seen nothing yet, because the psychology is one of the most self-regulating and self-protecting, let's call it an organ system, that we have, until it's not anymore. And so you adapt, you accommodate, you adjust. All those A words are the way that your psychological aspects function in normal everyday life, and especially in space flight.
Yeah.
But you're exposed to stresses that are the most unique that anybody's ever been exposed to in space flight. And if we're talking about a Mars mission, we're talking about, let's call it 2.5 years, just you and 3 other people face to face, and the volume of a couple of space station modules maybe, with the pressure and the eyes of the world on you to make sure you just wonder if you succeed. So there's no pressure, obviously, and nobody can help you when you're on your way to Mars. At least they can't help you immediately. There's going to be, when you get to Mars, you may be 8 minutes away from Earth by radio. At the midpoint of your stay on Mars, you might be 40 minutes away, 20 minutes away, one way by radio.
Yeah.
So if you have a problem and it takes less time than 20 minutes to fully express itself, and you don't know what you're doing, then you've got a big problem.
That was one thing Shane said. He said 5 minutes. He landed 5 minutes, and everyone was, taking him out of the capsule. And you're right. You're not going to have not only no help, but it's going to be a while until actually someone talks to you.
I like to paint a picture for people. That is, if you're the first person on Mars, and you're climbing down the ladder, and you stumble and fall face first into the Mars dust. The bad news is that everybody on Earth will see it because they're all going to be watching the live stream.
Of
but
course.
the good news is it'll be 20 minutes before they see it. So you've got a few minutes of relief before you have to explain to the entire universe how you stumbled for your first step on Mars.
That would be pretty cool if that was the actual video of the first person stepping on Mars. So obviously, you have to be thinking about, this is, obviously you are thinking about, this is kind of what that's going to look like if someone's going to land on Mars. What are we doing to sort of get them ready for that? One of the things I think, I'm pretty sure Shane mentioned, was they sat him in a seat and for a while, and then they took him right to a tent and started doing some field tests.
Yes, exactly, and that's exactly what we called it. We call it the field test. It's one of their human research program investigations. It's a joint investigation by the U.S. and the Russians. The U.S. and Russian investigators, Mildred Reschke and Inessa Kozlovskaya, are very long-time investigators, and they've both been anxious to do this kind of research on the adjustments of the sensory motor system and the neurovestibular system to gravity after a long-duration space flight. We started doing this a few years ago. Chris Cassidy, I think, was actually the first guy to do it on his Soyuz landing. And we've been doing it pretty consistently since then to try and build up a database of responses, so we know what an average and what the statistical mean is and what the variation is.
Nice sample size.
Right. And it's also very dramatic, and it's also it's an important set of things to do. But what it does briefly is, after they're extracted from their Soyuz, and you heard Shane talk about how they got out of the Soyuz with a lot of assistance. Nobody going to help you on Mars. Your vehicle has to be designed appropriately for you to get out on your own. Then they sit them in a chaise lounge for a little bit and have a brief public affairs event there on the steppes of Kazakhstan, and that's a good chance for them to catch their breath. And then they're carried, not walked, but they're carried into the medical tent, and inside the medical tent, in privacy, because of human research concerns.
Right, makes sense.
They are unsuited, that is, their spacesuits are taken off, and then if they volunteered for this investigation, they go through a stylized set of motions. And they start off with being seated in a chair and just being asked to stand upright and stand quietly for 30 seconds or so.
And that must be hard, though,
That's
right?
a substantial stress, a substantial effort.
Yeah.
Sonny Carter, back on STS-33, I think it was, said, and that was after a 5-day flight, said the hardest thing he had to do on his space flight was stand up for the first time after a space flight out of the chair in the shuttle.
Wow.
So that was after just a few days. Now this is after 6 months or so of weightlessness.
Right.
So that's the stress. We're watching their blood pressure, their heart rate, as well as their balance. And then sort of to add insult to injury, one of the early things we do then is to lay them on the floor in the face down in the prone position, and then ask them to stand up again. And it's to mimic. It's called recovery from a fall. So the idea is that they have stumbled on Mars, or they've stumbled on the Earth, and they find themselves face down in the red dust of Mars, like I mentioned before. How long does it take to get back up again? And that we can quantify how long it takes them to stand up, to go through all the complicated motions of getting up on your hands and getting up on your knees, and then finding a way to balance yourself and get back up. That's a very integrated physiological and musculoskeletal activity, and it can be quantified. And then once they've got them standing up again, and I always hasten to add that no astronauts are actually pushed over, they're asked to lay down gently and then stand up.
As funny as that would be,
that'd be another good video. But then we make them walk an obstacle course to see if they can do it. And the obstacle course is actually, as Shane described, walking in a straight line with your eyes closed, or with your eyes open, and then with your eyes closed. And sometimes, eyes closed, you veer because you're using your visual system is your dominant way to orient yourself in the absence of a functional vestibular system and in the absence of a fairly relaxed set of somatosensory sensors. Those are the sensors that detect pressure in the bottom of your feet and the angles of the joints, your ankle angles and your elbow angles and things like that. So walking with eyes open is always a challenge. Walking with eyes closed is almost always impossible because you veer immediately left or right because you just can't orient yourself in the absence of any inputs. And the inputs you're receiving are those that your brain has decided 6 months ago to ignore, and the inputs that it wanted to keep, you've now deprived of yourself of because your eyes are closed. So there's a little bit of a stressor there. And then there are other things that we ask them to do as they sort of gradually move through this set of activities, moving heavy masses back and forth as if they were unpacking a Mars lander and getting things set up on the surface of Mars.
Wow.
And, just a bunch of generalized things like that, so involving motions, bending, twisting, standing still, things like that.
So how long does that usually take?
It takes about 45 minutes
Wow.
in the tent, and that's only a subset. When they get back to Houston, there's a much longer set of activities they go through, and that'll be 24 hours after landing.
Right.
But we also test them in the airport in Karaganda, which is where the helicopter takes them after they land.
Right.
Or we test them in the airport, either in Norway or in Scotland, depending on where the jet lands to refuel on their way back. Their layover.
Yeah.
So that gives us, minutes and hours and then a day of adaptation. Then we watch them for several days post-flight, up to potentially even several weeks post-flight to track their full recovery back to normal. And this is specifically to quantify the responses, the reaccommodation, the readaptation back to gravity, so engineers can design habitats and landers for Mars missions, and they'll know what capabilities astronauts will have to design around.
Right.
Now, smart fellow that you are, you're going to say, but John, you already said that Mars has only 1/3 of a G, and here we are making them do all this stuff at 1 G.
Again, you're reading my mind.
We've worked together so much, I can anticipate your next thought. But the deal is, yes, we are making them do it at 1 G when normally on Mars there'd be at 1/3 of a G. All we've got is 1 G, and this is the closest we can get to that situation. So we have to make the appropriate adjustments if we think it's necessary to compensate for that fractional gravity. But right now, in answer to your next question, we don't have any information on what fractional gravity does, and so we just have to assume that it will be as unpleasant, uncomfortable, difficult as 1 G is. And then once we get experience at fractional gravity, like if we go to the moon and get 1/6 of a G experience, or if we land on Mars and do it a few times and say, you know what, that was not as hard as we said it was going to be, it's going to be easier here at 1/3 of a G, we can make the appropriate adjustments.
Right. There's a lot deeper of a story here, I can tell. There's a lot of different directions we can go. But I'm going to ask one more question, and then we're going to let you go. So, you have all these field tests, and you're kind of preparing for what we have to do in order to make a Mars mission work. So I do have one theoretical question for you. In a perfect world, if you were to land on Mars, what would you want that to look like? I'm guessing, can it be as simple as they land on Mars and they're good? They get out of the capsule, or is there other things that we are going to have to sacrifice based on the knowledge we have now to make that as easy as possible?
I think the answer is going to be yes and yes.
Awesome.
I think astronauts come in varieties just like other people do, and some people will have problems accommodating, adjusting, adapting, and others will not. Some folks are going to be able to land on Mars and bounce right up and feel like they want to go to work. We're probably going to insist that the landing vehicle be able to accommodate them for a couple of days.
I see.
Because we don't want to bet that they're all going to be perfect. They're all going to be bulletproof, and by perfect I mean in this particular regard, because they're all going to be perfect in some way. It's not just not just the 70s kids. we're all perfect in some way, but they're all not going to be perfect at adjusting to Mars. There's going to be some that are slower and some that are faster and some that are sort of run of the mill.
Mm-hmm.
We have to accommodate all of them, because you can't leave the guy behind that's not feeling the best and then go and start exploring Mars. So the goal is to make the landing vehicle as lightweight as possible. Previous discussion about mass and power and volume. Right. Which means minimize the amount of mass that you dedicate to life support systems. You don't want to build a 2-week life support system into the lander. If you're only going to use it for a couple of days, then you're going to feel good enough to go out and then traipse across the desert to the habitat that's waiting for you with all the life support you can use inside of it.
Right.
But you don't want to carry excess life support, but you don't want to carry too little life support in case it turns out to be, just by the luck of the draw, you've got 4 people that are going to have a tough time readjusting, and they don't want to put their spacesuits on and stumble across Mars face down into the dust, and things like that.
Yeah, they'll need a couple of days.
So what I would like to see the landing on Mars look like is that the entire crew feels good, and it was the luck of the draw that we got 4 people that just turned out to feel good this time. Mm-hmm. They understand the importance of the design of the habitat of the lander, so they take their time getting suited up and making the excursion out. Maybe we're clever on the first landing. We don't make them actually walk very much at all. We make them have a radio-controlled rover that deploys from the habitat and comes over and is waiting out their front door in the lander. And they get into that, and they drive off to the habitat, and they get in and set up housekeeping instead of actually having to stress themselves for the first time in a 6 or 8 month period of time after they've transited to Mars.
That's a cool concept. Nice.
Valet service. Valet service, and it might be maybe even a self-driving car. So maybe Uber or Amazon or Google's going to have something to say about it.
That's right.
And then they gradually become accustomed to their environment on Mars, so they can go to work on Mars. The habitat will have the gym, whatever it looks like, as well as the food and the fresh water and the fresh air. But the point of all this is not to cater to the astronauts. The goal is to make sure that the astronauts are, as I like to say, in the best condition of their lives when they land. So they minimize the time they spend readapting.
Right.
Because the Mars missions will be the most expensive undertakings humanity's ever embarked upon.
Sure.
And if we want to have a second and a third and a fourth and a fifth one, the first one had better be productive. And the way to be productive is to be in good conditions so you can get to work as quickly as possible, allowing for the accommodation time of a few days or a week or so, and then get to work and show us why we sent you to Mars and make those Nobel Prize winning discoveries on Mars so that Congress and the parliaments of all the partner agencies and everybody, all the taxpayers, think, yeah, that was a good thing. We want to do that some more. We'll have more Mars missions and build up the flow to Mars and the infrastructure for Mars. So it sounds like I'm altruistic, but Gary, you know me well enough to know that I'm not altruistic. I want the astronauts to be in great condition when they land on Mars, not just for themselves, but for us too, because if we have hopes of becoming a multi-planet society, our first emissaries to other planets will have to demonstrate how productive we can be on other planets, and that's really the goal here.
John, I want you to lead the charge and lead us all the way to Mars.
I'm not going to Mars. I want to stay at home and cheer them on.
Well, this was awesome. Thanks for coming on the show and talking about, really analyzing what Shane was feeling and why we are doing what we're doing. Obviously for later missions and landing on Mars. So obviously, there's some stuff that Dr. Charles was not able to address today. So for those listening, if you want to know more or you have a suggestion on what we need to talk about, stay tuned till after the music to learn on where and how you can submit some ideas. So John, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Delighted.
Glad to have you. We'll probably have to have you again.
Okay.
Houston, go ahead.
Off of the space shuttle.
Roger, 0G, and I feel
The
fine.
shuttle has cleared the tower.
in peace for all mankind.
It's actually a huge honor to break a record like this.
Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Never Houston, welcome to space.
Hey, thanks for sticking around. So I hope you enjoyed our talk with Dr. John Charles and astronaut Shane Kimbrough. If you want to learn more about kind of all the things that specifically Dr. Charles talked about, we actually have a website for that. Per usual, nasa.gov/HRP. This is the website for the Human Research Program, and you can learn about everything that they're studying there. All of these things that Dr. Charles was talking about, the human body, bone density. Even we have some stuff about the twin study that happened actually a couple years ago now when Scott Kelly launched in 2015. So you can find all that information there. A lot of the research that's done, and especially with Shane Kimbrough on the International Space Station was done up there on that orbiting complex. You can go to nasa.gov/ISS to learn about the latest updates on the International Space Station, all the latest blogs and scientific findings. We also have a lot of cool pictures that we like to put up on that website. On social media, we're very active. Facebook is the International Space Station. That's their Facebook page. On Twitter, we're at @space_station. And on Instagram, it's @ISS. If you want to submit an idea or you have a question about something that we talked about on the podcast, just use that hashtag #AskNASA on your favorite platform. Doesn't matter. We'll check them all. And we'll make sure that we address it on one of the next podcasts that we do. And maybe we even will make a whole podcast episode out of it. So this podcast was recorded on April 19th. Thanks to John Stoll and Eric Perryman for helping to produce the show. Thanks again to Dr. John Charles and Shane Kimbrough for coming on the show. See you in 6.79 sols. Get it? Because the Mars... Okay. See you next time.
Now that you know about life on the station, imagine yourself floating away from it. Ahead are only stars and quiet stories about how they become astronauts. Keep breathing slowly and dive deeper.
Houston, we have a podcast. Welcome to the official podcast of the NASA Johnson Space Center, Episode 4, Space Food. I'm Gary Jordan, and I'll be your host today. So this is the podcast where we bring in the experts, NASA scientists, engineers, astronauts, all the coolest people that tell you all the coolest parts about NASA. So today we're talking about space food with Takia Sermons. She's a food scientist here at the NASA Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. And we had a great discussion about the science behind what astronauts eat, what it is, how they make it, and how they have a long shelf life, and what happens to an astronaut's palate after living in space for several months. So with no further delay, let's go light speed and jump right ahead to our talk with Dr. Takia Sermons. Enjoy.
T-minus 5 seconds and counting. Mark. All launch commit lights are correct. There she goes.
Houston, we have a podcast.
Okay, well, Takia, thank you so much for taking the time to come here today and talk about space food. This is one of my favorite topics because it's space food, right? You're like, when you think about astronauts, you think about what do they eat in space, and then you have all of these preconceived notions about what they eat in space. And so I thought, first of all, I think we should start the episode before we even get into anything by just debunking a couple myths, right? So
debunk those myths.
Let's debunk it right off the bat. Did NASA invent Tang?
NASA did not invent Tang.
See?
Tang was already in existence. It was created in the late 50s by a company called Mission Foods.
Okay.
And we flew it in the early 60s when we were trying to figure out our food system. So John Glenn tasted Tang in space, and it boosted its popularity. And ever since then, it's been synonymous with the space program. But we did not create it. We just purchased it, repackaged it, and then sent it into space.
See, I feel like that's just always one of those things that people always bring up, though, right? They always say, "Oh, Tang, that's a NASA thing," and I guess they just got kind of tied together for whatever reason. But they did use Tang because
we did use Tang, and we still use Tang. We still use Tang until today, but we did not invent it. We did not.
Okay, it's just because of that rehydratable, or the idea that you don't have to ship up these bags of water. You can just ship up bags of powder.
Yeah,
and then
powdered
add water
flavor
to
essentially.
It.
So it's already convenient. You just put it into the beverage package and you add water to it, and you have a great flavored beverage. And it worked. We don't try to reinvent the wheel here. And we had a product that was on the market that was great, so we just sent it. So.
All right, cool. All right, there's one more that at least comes to the top of my head, and you might be able to add a couple more. But astronaut ice cream.
Oh, astronaut ice cream. That's been plaguing the food lab for a long time now. So, the ice cream that you see in the novelty stores with the strawberry, vanilla, chocolate swirl, we have never sent anything that is remotely like that.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Back in the Apollo days, we sent ice cream one time, and it was in the cube form. So if you think back to tube and cube days, it was a pressed food substance that was coated, so it didn't have a lot of crumbs.
Interesting.
And that flew one time at the request of an astronaut, and it hasn't flown since. No one else has requested it after that. From time to time, the astronauts get ice cream. If there is a science experiment that requires refrigeration or a freezer on the way back, we will load up the empty unit with ice cream, or if it's plugged in, if it's powered up, and they'll get ice cream, single serve ice cream, every once in a while, but it's very, very rare. Only other time that they may have had ice cream was during the Skylab days.
Oh, okay.
And that's because we had refrigeration and a freezer on that particular vessel.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, well, I feel like those astronauts should consider themselves real lucky because they're the few that actually get to have it sometimes.
Every once in a while.
Ice cream in space. So cool. Okay, so it's nice to see you again after the Super Bowl thing that we did.
Yeah, that's the last time we got together.
Exactly. It was so fun. That was so they had Super Bowl live downtown, and NASA just came up and did like a culinary event, and we talked about food science.
Yeah.
We talked about, what we have to do different. It's because it wasn't really a cooking show. It was like this is what NASA does. Even though we were preparing meals and having everyone sample them,
yeah.
it was pretty cool. And there is that's you're not considered chefs, right? You're considered food scientists because there's a whole different mindset when it comes to food in space, right?
Yeah, so you're taking a product that everyone is used to, everyone's familiar with food. Food is very important. Our emotions are tied to food, and you're getting it to last for an extended period. And so I think that's where the beauty of this profession comes in. You're solving problems with an everyday product that you need for life.
So is that kind of the main purpose of space food? Is your job to make the food last as long as possible, or is there more to that?
Well, there's a nutrition component, obviously. So it's a prepackaged food system. So imagine if you were on a diet plan and the only thing that you could have is what a company sent you in a box. You need to make sure that it's nutritionally sound, that the calories are balanced, and that it tastes good. Because if you've eaten the same product for over, I want to say 6 months or so, you're going to get tired of it. So that's where we come into place. We want to have foods that are nutritious, that offer a wide variety, but they are also appetizing at the same point. And it's a really delicate balance. A lot of people think that, it's just food, you can just make it, but it's a lot of moving parts that go into making space food.
Yeah, there really are. So let's just go right into it, right? So space food. Why are we talking now about space food versus just do they have a kitchen up in the International Space Station right now? What is different about space food? Like the overall concept of it?
Well, the difference is that it's already prepared for you. So most of the foods that they have, it's a prepackaged food system, like I said before.
Yeah.
So we do all of the cooking and all of the processing here on Earth. We send it up, and they can either reheat it in the case of thermostabilized products, which I guess we'll get into in a minute.
Sure.
And then they'll add water to our rehydratable products. And so all of the cooking and all of the preparation has been done for them. They just need to prepare it in that moment, how they're going to eat it. And then if they want to remix the foods in any ways, then they have the opportunity to do that. But it's there's no room for a kitchen. They have a food preparation area where they can make the meals and then eat them on the go. And they also are very limited in the amount of time that they have. So anything that we give them, they have to be able to heat up in about 15 minutes or so and then go on to the next task. So it's not enough time in a day for them to actually cook foods.
Right. They have like what do they allot? Like an hour for like lunch, but they don't even allot too much time. They allot some time in the beginning and end of the day, but not really like I think they allow like an hour for lunch.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much it.
It's a really tight window. So I mean, if you want to just eat and relax during that time, you don't have the time to actually prepare the food. So.
Makes sense. Okay, so it's not ingredients-based packaging; it's meal-based packaging.
It is meal-based packaging. Yeah. So we package entrees separately, and then we have a number of side dishes, a number of snacks, a number of desserts, and they can pick and choose from any menu of items that they want, or any variety of items that they want.
So they pick and choose all the time, or do they have like specific, like, for on this day you're gonna eat this for lunch, so they don't have like meal planning?
No, so we put together what's called a standard menu, and it's basically a suggested menu that will get them to the amount of calories that they need per day. But when they eat, it's prepared pantry style. So we'll send up a container that has X amount of side dishes, X amount of entrees, X amount of vegetables, and they can pick from those containers. We only ask that they open one container at a time. And so that's how we know if the inventory is getting low. We just assume that they've eaten everything in that container once it's open.
Got it. It helps you keep track, so you can. Okay.
But we don't mandate that they eat according to a certain menu. We've tried that in the past, and we've seen that it doesn't necessarily work. The only time that they have to eat according to a specific menu is if they're participating in a nutritional study. So they're tracking the actual foods that they have and how their bodies react to that. That's the only time, but that's never the entire duration of their stay.
Yeah, they have experiments like that, right? where they're actually doing sort of like meal planning.
Correct. They have shorter duration experiments, and during that time, we'll track exactly what they eat and have to eat according to that menu. But outside of that, they just kind of grab what they want.
So that's what they do for the most part.
For the most part.
Yeah, they're just going in and having whatever they feel like having that day. Yeah, I know. So Peggy has, she got her mission extended, and she's starting to get to that point where she's up there for a long time and starting to, the menu can only be so big, so you're gonna have and I know what was her favorites that she just mentioned, chicken. What was it? Chicken fajitas, I think was her favorite. So, but you obviously have your favorites and things that are good, but then you're gonna have you can't please everyone, right? It's just like any food at home, right? So everyone has their preferences.
Everyone has their preference, and after a while, they start remixing meals. We make a mac and cheese product, and we make a chili product, and you can mix them together and make chili mac and cheese. And they do that all the time. If you're eating the same thing for 6 months, you're like, okay, I got to find a new way to develop this product. So
So you open up some containers, and like you said, they're pantry-based organizations. So you have like your snacks package, and you have everything. So how are the meals? And you hinted at this before. Like thermostabilized is one way of packaging a meal, right? So
it's one way of preserving a food product. So everything that we send to the International Space Station, it has to be shelf stable. We don't have refrigerators. We don't have freezers. We only had that for a short period of time during the Skylab days, and that was like our early stab at a space station type vehicle.
Right.
Right now, we don't have the power to support those type of preservation, so refrigerators or freezers. So everything is shelf stable, meaning that we have to preserve the foods before we send them on Earth. So the primary methods are thermostabilized, which is essentially canning, but in a flexible pouch. So if you've seen MRE pouches that the military uses.
Meals ready to eat. They're just like these brown rectangular packages.
So we use the same technology. It's basically a canning system, so a giant pressure cooker. You kill any bacteria using heat as well as pressure. And the
thermostabilized.
Yeah,
it's coming together.
Becomes stable through thermal processing.
There you go.
And so about half of our foods are produced that way, and then other foods are produced via freeze drying. And I think most people are familiar with freeze dried foods.
Right.
You basically pull all the moisture out of a food product so that nothing can grow. And those products are great because they're lightweight. We're able to pack more into our containers because they don't weigh as much. And all they have to do is add the water back when they get to the space station. So.
Nice. Is there a benefit to doing one versus the other for particular foods?
So it depends on the food product. Some can't withstand the processing for thermal processing. Say if you have a product that has a lot of cheese in it, you have a lot of negative effects when you apply that high of a temperature to it. So those do better when you freeze dry them. And so sometimes we can try the foods both ways, and you'll see whichever one comes out better.
Okay.
It just depends on the food product.
Nice. Okay, so for the rehydratable ones, I'm guessing since the thermostabilized are MRE, you can technically just rip open the package and start eating, right?
You just heat them up and then eat them.
So they do have the ability to heat them up.
Yeah, they have a small food warmer on station that they can put their pouches into. It doesn't get terribly hot, but I mean it's warm enough so that you can enjoy it.
Okay, so it's like the space version of, I guess, a microwave, but just not as fast, maybe?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And then so for the freeze-dried ones, that one, they actually have to rehydrate, right? They have to stick it in a machine that gives it water, and then do they let it sit for a while?
Correct. They have a rehydration station on ISS. And on all of our food products, we tell them how much water they need to add, whether or not it's room temperature or it has to be warm water. They'll inject the product, and it rehydrates within 10 to 15 minutes. Again, they don't have a lot of time to wait for their products to rehydrate. And then they can put it in the food warmer if they want it warmer, or they can put it into a small chiller if they want it cool. And then they're able to enjoy the product that way.
Nice.
So it takes a little bit longer to prepare than the thermostabilized products, but I think the quality sometimes is a lot better.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, because I guess it goes through, I guess the process of that makes it actually taste better, right?
Well, the texture is preserved a little bit. If you imagine just cooking something, basically cooking it to death versus something where you pull the water out, pull the water out and then you add it back into the same place, it's a slightly better texture.
Oh, okay. See, these are just things like I'm thinking like regular food, like cooking over a pan. I just you don't normally think about this stuff, but okay. So I've seen that machine before that they use to rehydrate their meals, and it's kind of cool. They have a dial, like you said, they can put a certain amount of liquid into it. So however many milliliters it takes to rehydrate that particular food.
Yep.
So what foods take a little bit more water than others, and why?
It depends. Products that have, obviously, if you have more of a food product in the package, it's going to take slightly more water.
Okay.
Depending on if there's sugar in the product or not, that may not require as much water to rehydrate.
Mm-hmm.
They also adjust the amount of water that they put in. So we may do our testing on Earth and say, hey, you need 75 milliliters. They may not like their food that watery, so they'll just dial it back a little bit. So it just really depends on the product and preferences once they get into space.
Yeah, so I guess they just learn from experience in that kind of instance, where it's just like, that one was a little bit too watery for me. Maybe next time I'll use the same thing because it was good, but just a little bit less water.
Yeah,
okay.
And it takes a couple of times to, I guess, learn the product.
Nice. So you work in the food lab, so I'm assuming you've tried a bunch of the different meals. So
what a lot of food.
Yeah. So what are some of your favorites?
I really like the meatloaf. I think it's really flavorful. It's better than the meatloaf that I make at home, which I don't know if that's saying saying a lot. I'm really fond of anything sweet, so the dessert category, I'm always dipping in the dessert category. We have chocolate pudding cake, lemon curd cake, cherry blueberry cobbler, so those are probably some of my favorites.
I've tried the cherry blueberry cobbler.
Like
that
it?
one is really
delicious, right?
good. Really good. Yeah.
Anything sweet, I think, is my favorite.
So I know, but in space, I think it's a little bit different because I guess there's something where the astronauts over time start to lose, I guess, a little bit of their taste sensitivity. So they start to enjoy spicier foods. But is there a reason for that?
So the perception of taste changes a little bit. Number one, they're in microgravity, so there's a fluid shift, and so it's kind of like eating with a head cold. There's still flavor there, but everything is muted. And so the preference for spicy foods is because you can always taste spicy foods. It gives you a little bit more kick. Mm-hmm. And so we always provide a variety of condiments. They have pepper on station, not in the powder form, but it's not in the granulated form, I'm sorry. It's dissolved in an oil, so they can squeeze a drop and touch it to the product, and they can spice up their foods. We have a number of hot sauce. Hot sauce is always on the menu, different kinds of hot sauce.
I love hot sauce. I would bring so much hot sauce if I went up to Orbit.
Well, you live in Texas, so that's understandable. So a lot of hot sauce to spice up their foods. One of the favorites is shrimp cocktail.
Okay.
Because it has a spicy kick in it, and I guess anything, spicy.
Anything spicy, yeah. So how about sweet? Is sweet a little bit enhanced, or is the sweetness muted so they add more sugar or something like that?
I've not heard that they add more sugar, and I haven't had very many complaints about sweet products. I think it comes down to a preference. If you like sweet products before you go into space, you'll still have a sweet tooth when you go into space, and vice versa. So.
Oh, okay. Wait, does preference change at all?
I've heard that preference does change. So before any crew member goes into space, they sit down with our dietitian, and we have one dietitian on staff who essentially shows them the entire menu. So they'll work their way through all 200 different menu items.
That sounds like a great day.
A great day. But they do it over several days. So they'll come maybe 4 different times. They'll have lunch with us, and it's just so that they know what to expect and they understand how the food is going to taste when they get into space, or hopefully how it's going to taste when they get into space. They rate all the products, and then items that are scored pretty high, we add those to their crew-specific container, which is essentially like a bonus container. It's separate from the standard menu, so it's just for that particular crew member. Nice. And we do that in case they really like one item and we don't provide enough of it in the standard menu. They can have some just for themselves.
All right.
And so we've heard that they come in to evaluate foods and they score it really high, and then when they get into space they're like, oh, I don't want this product anymore. So
really,
it's really hard to accommodate that. But.
Wow. that would stink if you like really enjoyed one item and you're like, for example, like the cherry blueberry cobbler, and you're like, oh, that's my favorite dessert, I'm gonna have like a bunch of that, and then you put it in your personal and you take up all this space, and then you're like, I really don't want it, I've had too much cherry blueberry cobbler.
Yeah, well, I mean, you live and you learn.
Yeah, I guess.
But they trade a lot of foods on space station, so if you said that you wanted one product and it doesn't taste the same when you get into space, I'm sure someone else would like that product. So it works out usually.
So, I mean, beyond, preparing, I guess, specifically for the International Space Station, because that's where we're flying right now, you sit them down and you go through the whole menu to select what they're going to have aboard. But are there any other processes before they go up where you are preparing, in a sense?
preparing them for
preparing either the meals or like how do you get ready for that? So do you sit down with the dietitian and then select your meals and then you are busy preparing that food for the next couple months? Like what other steps are there?
You mean in the lab? What do we prepare?
In the lab.
Oh, so we keep inventory. So like I said before, all the food is packed according to category.
Okay.
And we ask that they just open one container at a time per category. So once they've opened it, they'll scan it and we'll get a message saying, hey, they've opened their breakfast items, which means that is no longer in inventory.
Oh.
So we'll at that point go and prepare more breakfast items in the lab and have them available for the next shipment.
Okay.
Is that what
so yeah. So it's more like you're watching what everyone's doing in orbit then.
Right,
it's not
right,
necessarily like, they sit down and they're like, this is what I want, and then you're preparing their meals for their orbit specifically.
No. We don't do it that way
okay.
because they eat according to a standard menu. For their crew-specific containers, if it's something that we don't have on the menu, so say we send up granola bars, a generic form of granola bar.
Okay.
If you have a certain brand that you're loyal to, we will go to the store and buy that brand for you as long as it's flight compatible, meaning that it doesn't have a lot of crumbs, it's not very liquidy, it's not going to produce a lot of free liquid in space.
Okay.
We'll repackage it and send it into space for you. So those items we will do on a case-by-case basis. If you say, I really like this brand of chocolate granola bar, we will go and get that for you.
Nice.
And package it.
All right. Okay. I'm trying to think of other things that I would probably want to package, but I'm thinking of a lot of crummy stuff. So, and that's one thing they have to be wary of, right? Is because crumbs are not good to have on orbit because I guess they fly around.
Yeah, I mean it's a closed environment. If you don't eat it in space, it's going to float around and it's going to get stuck somewhere. If it gets stuck in your eye, it can get stuck in equipment. We just don't know where it's going to land. So we try to avoid that. We don't send chips into space for that reason, but you can have crackers for
Oh, okay, because they're less crummy.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So I know another one is bread, right? You can't ship bread up because bread is crummy, and instead they use tortillas.
Right, they have tortillas, and we have one type of bread product that we send up, and it's an extended shelf life bread, and we purchase that and then we send it into space. But primarily when they want to have a sandwich or something on the go, they'll use tortillas because it's just really convenient.
Yeah.
So traditional bread that you find on the shelf, we can't send that up. The shelf life isn't long enough, and then it produces too many crumbs.
All right. So what else has the food lab learned just from now that you've been flying in space, food to space for so long? What have you sort of learned along the way, like bread, for example, thinking about crumbs? What other things have you learned along the way and kind of adapted to the menu that you have now?
Geez, lessons learned from flying in space. I'd like to say that the hardest thing to control is the human factor of eating in space. So like I said before, we don't dictate what they eat in space because we've tried that in the past, and it doesn't necessarily work.
Because they want to eat what they want to eat.
Yeah, and I mean that's a human factor that you can't control for. So you have people who are very brilliant people that are going into space, but there's a psychological component that goes along with eating. And when you eat something, it reminds you of home. There's comfort foods that you have.
Yeah.
You can't always mandate what someone does or doesn't want to eat. And so I think that's been one of our biggest lessons learned throughout the history of the space
So I guess
program.
it's a lot of planning then is really what the lessons come down to. You're trying to plan to come up with something diverse, or if someone wants something, you can deliver, that kind of thing.
And that's been the driving force behind the food lab here at JSC. We started from Tube and Cube days, and we were providing nutrition, but it wasn't very good. It wasn't very appetizing, and we learned quickly that you had to provide something that at least mimicked or resembled food here on Earth. And so that's what we've been doing since the beginning of the space program, when we were allowing humans to eat in space, is just trying to improve it and get something that's closer to what you would normally have here on Earth. So
nice. So I mean, working with space food and designing food that has to be nutritionally balanced for the astronauts, what have you learned that you've taken into your personal life about food? Like just little tips and tricks that maybe us at home can take into account. Just like, maybe I should have, I know there's a lot of fad diets out there, right? So people are eliminating carbohydrates and starting to eat more proteins or something like that. Is there anything that you've learned just from creating food for astronauts on board?
I would say that seasonings go a very long way. I was prior to coming into the food lab, I seasoned everything with salt and pepper.
Okay.
And we had a large sodium reduction initiative in our food lab a couple years ago.
Okay.
We were finding that the astronauts were having some of the astronauts were having vision problems from having high blood pressure in space. And
so reduce the blood
we
pressure,
reduced the sodium to reduce blood pressure.
Okay.
And along with that, you had to reformulate a lot of your products and figure out different ways to season them. And don't underestimate the power of good seasonings and herbs and spices. And so now in my personal life, I season a lot more with those. They're slightly more expensive, but they go a lot a further way than just salt and pepper.
So it's eliminating sodium from your well, at least reducing.
Well, not eliminating it.
Reducing,
Right,
and then
right.
seasoning them with different things other than salt.
Yeah, so in my personal life, I've learned how to do that.
Okay, all right, that's a good one. I'm gonna take that one back. And I like putting salt. I'm the same way, right? I put salt and pepper on
Salt
everything.
on everything.
Yeah, because it's a good neutral seasoning and enhances the flavor of whatever you're eating without necessarily changing it.
Right.
And yeah, but I guess that's a bummer because I really like salt. Okay.
You can have your salt.
Okay, so up on board, they're gonna have their preferences, right? We've been talking about
Correct.
this, but do they share meals, right? And this is an international space station, so
Correct.
do they share internationally?
So the U.S. provides about half of the food for the International Space Station, and then our international partners, primarily Russia, provides the other half of the foods.
Okay.
The astronauts that come and evaluate foods in-house, they are U.S. astronauts, but it's not uncommon once they get into space to begin trading food with the Russians and vice versa.
Oh, okay.
So it's a lot of trading that goes on. It just kind of depends on their preference. If they see something they like, then they'll try it, and then they can request Russian food in their crew-specific containers if they really like an item. So the next time we have a vehicle go up, we can send those foods. But very common for them to trade foods amongst themselves because you get curious after a while.
Yeah.
What are you guys eating? I want to know what that is. So.
And they package theirs differently, right? So you're talking about in the U.S. we package thermostabilized, we do the dehydrated or the what did you say? You said freeze-dried.
Freeze-dried foods.
Freeze-dried foods, and they do theirs in cans.
Yeah,
right?
they still use a can system, which means that their food warmer is slightly different. So they have their food warmer allows you to drop the cans into a slot, and they warm it that way. And our foods obviously don't fit in that particular configuration. So it's very different. The one advantage to moving to a flexible pouch, which we use, is that it's a lot lighter, so you can send more food up.
Oh.
If it makes sense.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, I do like that. It's something you have to think about, right? Especially when you're launching things to space, you got to make sure that weight is money, right?
Yeah, weight is money.
Yeah, so you gotta reduce that, and that makes a lot of sense. Going back to the lab, when you're talking about sharing, but you do have to prepare it, and you said that you're preparing. You realize the inventory of what's on board, and then prepare it that way. What's that like? What does preparing entail? Like, are you making dish by dish and putting them into packages? Like, what's the process to get from a meal here on the ground packaged and ready to go, shipped up to the International Space Station?
So it's kind of a batch process. We'll make maybe 100 pounds of food, 80 to 100 pounds of food, depending on the process. Will determine how long it takes. So with thermostabilized foods, you'll make a large kettle, and then you'll put the food into individual serving sizes.
Okay.
And so one of those flexible pouches is a serving of food. So say you take 160 grams, you'll package it, you'll seal it, and then you'll put the entire batch into a retort, which is basically a giant pressure cooker.
Oh, okay.
And that retort will run at a high temperature, high pressure for, say, an hour. And then you'll take all those packages out, inspect them one by one, and then they will be stored until it's time to send those.
Okay.
For freeze-dried foods, the process is a little bit longer because it can take up to a week to remove all of that moisture in our freeze dryers. So the process starts about the same. You'll buy ingredients from the grocery store, you'll inspect all of the ingredients, make your batch of foods, and then you'll either freeze dry them into individual servings or into one large pan. And then from there, you take the pan of product, and then you'll put it into individual servings, package it, and then store it until you're ready to use it. So it takes a long time. It's a process.
But you have to do that, right? You got to make sure the food is going to be good when
Correct.
you send it up, like both in terms of taste, obviously, but in terms of quality.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see. You talked about shelf life. It's one of the more important things. So you're going through this process for a reason. It lasts a long time.
Right.
So what is a typical shelf life of space food?
Again, it depends on the product. We try to have an inventory that will last for at least 6 months.
6 months.
6 months on space station.
Okay.
Our thermostabilized foods, because of the processing, those can last from 1 year up to 2 years, and then it can last beyond that, depending on what the product is. But we definitely shoot for at least 6 months on space station, and that just allows us enough time to prepare more foods and to get another vehicle up.
What are the steps that need to happen to take it beyond that?
So if we needed to extend it beyond whatever shelf life we assigned it.
Yeah.
So we have a control set that we have on Earth. It's housed here at JSC.
Okay.
Anytime that we make a product and we package it, we'll pull a couple samples and keep them in storage here. And so if there's a situation where we have to extend the shelf life, we as a team will evaluate those products and make sure that it's still acceptable. So if I'm not going to eat it on Earth, I would never ask you to eat it in space. We don't put them through anything we're not willing to suffer through. So.
Okay, so you prepare it to last that long. You've packaged it. You've gone through that whole process. What about getting it to space? How does that happen? How do you get from the lab? And I guess how much do you put in a single cargo vehicle to get to space?
So there's no solid answer for that. It really depends on how much space is available on that vehicle and what the inventory looks like on ISS.
So it's constantly changing.
It's constantly changing. No vehicle has the same amount of weight put into that. With that being said, we don't have our own vehicle that we use. We use commercial vehicles, so SpaceX and Orbital now. Those will dock with the International Space Station. They'll unload the food, and then they'll load up any trash or anything that needs to come back, or experiments that need to come back. So we don't send that on our own.
Okay. Yeah, but okay. So it changes just based on whatever you have. What is available on that?
Yeah, it's all inventory driven. So whatever is available in space, that will dictate what we make on Earth as well as what we package and what we send on the next vehicle.
But I'm assuming you have plenty of food on the International Space Station, right? So there's a very low chance that they'll actually run out.
Yeah, they'll never be in a situation where they're running out of food. They may not have all the variety that they like. They might be down to peanut butter and something that they don't necessarily like.
Yeah.
But they will never run out of food. It's set up so that they have a reserve of food at all times.
All right. Yeah. So, what's some of the more creative things you've seen astronauts do with the food? Because you said they're prepared in a way that's just you can just heat them up and eat them as is because they're already meals. But are they adding stuff together and the chili mac and cheese sounds amazing.
It sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I guess they make a little bit of anything.
Okay.
We filmed a video a couple of months ago where we had 2 astronauts come in and show us some of their treats, and I think I was the most blown away with the space s'mores.
Space s'mores.
They had a chocolate brownie. I want to say they put peanut butter paste and then cookies on the outside, and I was actually really impressed with the flavor of that one. And that's not anything that I would have thought of, but I guess if you're in space for 6 months and you've been eating the same food, you kind of think of different ways to consume it.
Wow, if you're gonna snack, you're in space, you're gonna snack right. The space s'more. That sounds amazing. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so we've been talking a lot about the International Space Station, and it seems like we're in a system where we're learning, and you're learning how to do different things to make it as efficient as possible. And it sounds like it's very efficient right now, the way that food is delivered, eaten, the whole process. It seems, but for deep space, what has to change? And I'm assuming shelf life is at the top of that list, but we've already brought down the weight so much with the freeze drying capabilities. But what do we have to do to prepare for a mission to deep space and to Mars?
Well, you're right. Shelf life is our number one concern. We can make foods that last 2 years easily. That's what we've been doing for the International Space Station. When you start talking about going to Mars, you're looking at a 5-year shelf life. And that's because there have been talks of pre-positioning the food. So we launch the food ahead of the crew. The crew travels, completes the mission, and then we have to have food that will last to come back.
Okay.
And so no one has ever done a 5-year shelf life. It's not something that's necessarily desired in industry because it doesn't make money. The quicker you can turn products over, the better for a food company.
Yeah,
and so no one is really testing out to 5 years, and so that's been a challenge for us, not only quality-wise but nutritionally. We have to make sure that vitamins and minerals are stable stable through the entire duration of the mission, so that you don't have astronauts that are malnourished at the end of their stay on Mars, So that's been a challenge. That's what we're looking at now. A lot of projects that we have starting now are looking at the shelf life of foods up to 5 years.
So, I mean, you can obviously store food for long periods of time. What about growing food? Is the food lab a part of any experiments where you're talking about planting vegetables or something like that and growing them in a different environment?
Well, we're not growing plants at the food lab. A lot of that work is housed out of Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
Okay.
And so they are growing different dwarf vegetables with the expectation that would supplement the food system, but not necessarily be the full menu. So you still have to have a standard menu that will provide the core amount of calories, and then there's a certain amount of food that you can grow to increase that variety. And so we've partnered with them on a couple of their projects, mainly for the sensory component. So seeing whether or not those products taste good and whether or not consumers can tell the difference between a product that was grown in the greenhouse versus something that you would buy in the grocery store. And so we've done a little bit of work with them on that.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. That sounds awesome.
They can have a salad in space.
Yeah. Just cut up some fresh tomatoes or something.
But I mean, that goes a long way. If you haven't had a salad in a while, then you'd be very thrilled to have one.
That is true. They did something on International Space Station recently, right? The veggie experiment.
The veggie experiment.
They grew some lettuce, and Scott Kelly and Kjell Lindgren and some of those guys actually got to taste it up in orbit, and they said it tasted like arugula.
Oh, okay. Arugula is fancy.
Yeah. So it'd be good for a salad, right?
It would be great.
Sprinkle a little arugula on either salad or I'm imagining eggs Benedict right now. I'm super hungry.
We're not there yet.
Yeah.
One day.
One day. Okay. All right. So is there anything that you've learned, besides about astronauts, just anything new? I know taste buds maybe change, but is there anything that they've brought down with them from their experience on orbit that has kind of changed the way that, or maybe not exactly changed the way, but just added something to the way that you process food, make food, something like that?
I think the preparation component has changed a little bit. We're constantly getting feedback, like we mentioned before, the amount of water that it takes to rehydrate a food item. We may get feedback that says, hey, when we were up there, it took more than 15 minutes, so you guys might want to look at your formula again. Or it didn't take that much water, I had to add water. So those are things that help us to improve the products for the next crew that goes up. And so we're constantly depending on astronauts for their feedback so that we can optimize any formulas that we have in-house.
All right.
Yep.
Cool. All right. I just know from talking to different astronauts, it's just their experience with making food and eating food, and it's always visually just a cool thing to watch, right? Because a lot of them end up playing with
your food.
It's a very cool thing to play with, right? They bring out the different colored candies,
and then they float.
Yeah, and they float, and they're making water bubbles and drinking that. Like, what I guess are all the drinks powdered, and then they have to rehydrate or
yes, every drink that we send, whether it's coffee with sugar, or just a hint of lemon, it goes in a powdered form, and then they add water to it. And all of our beverages have a clamp on them, so it's to prevent that bubble from floating around in space. But if you want to play with your food, you just remove the clamp, and then over time, liquid will come through the straw and start to bubble at the top. So
there you go.
Yeah. So the eating experience is very different. I think you have to think more about it when you're in space, just to make sure that you aren't making a mess everywhere. So.
That's true. So I mean, I should have asked about that, about just drinking. Just coming out of a pouch, you have a straw coming out of a pouch. You have to clamp the straw.
You have to clamp the straw shut, and it won't happen fast, but eventually over time you'll start to see a large bubble at the top, and if you're not watching it, then that can fall off. So
wow. So the bubble appears at the top of the straw, and then I guess you can kind of I've seen.
Yeah, then you can play with it.
You can play with it. Yeah. Okay. So but eating though, I guess we talked about making and eating, but we didn't really talk about the actual process of eating. So when you open up a package, is the food flying out, or does it stick to the inside of the package?
So surface tension will keep the food in the package. It'll keep it on the fork. They all have metal utensils that they use, and they just clean them with wipes after they're done with the food product, because you can't have free water. They can't wash dishes, but they can sanitize and clean them. But the overall experience is a little different because number one, your food is floating, and then you're floating in space.
Yeah.
And so when we package food, we use Vel coins on the back of every product, and that's so that you can literally stick it to the wall and your food doesn't float away. So if you're say you're snacking while you're doing something else, you have your food product there, you have your beverage there, and it's stuck to one place. You can't just sit it it on a table and walk away like we have that luxury here on Earth, your product will be somewhere else, somewhere else in the space station. So
that's interesting. So you put you call it a Velcoin?
Yeah, a small Velcro coin.
Oh, okay. It's like a circular. Okay, so then it sticks to that, and then the food is inside the package just because of surface tension.
Right,
so
and it'll stay in the package, and it just makes sure that your food is where you left it when you turn your back. So.
And then whenever you're scooping it out with your fork or spoon or whatever, it's not sticking just because, when you think about soup is the first thing that comes to mind. You scoop your soup and it stays at the bottom of the spoon because of gravity.
Yes.
But if you're scooping, I don't know if they probably don't have soup. Do they have soup?
No, they have a number of soup items.
Do they really?
Yeah, they have
soup. Oh, right.
Some of them have solid pieces in them, and so they eat them with a spoon. And then we have a couple of them that are it's just more of a broth, and so you can drink those with a straw. So they have a number of soup products.
And does it stick to the?
It sticks to the food.
No
spoon.
way!
Yep.
It sticks to the spoon.
Yep.
That's really cool. Awesome. All right, I have so many more questions. I want to make sure that I get them all. Okay, so you're sticking it to the wall, and they have like a. I'm throwing up some air quotes here. So a dinner table, right? It's really just a table that's kind of diagonally against a wall, but they have like tape and Velcro on it, right?
Yeah,
so that
you
they
can stick your food product down.
Stick their food down.
And it's still a communal experience. No one wants to eat alone, so unless they decide to, we don't dictate that.
Sometimes they're busy, right?
Yeah, sometimes they're just busy, but I mean, it is set up so that they can at least have the community aspect of eating together, breaking bread together.
Breaking bread. Yeah, just all having a meal together. That's pretty awesome. Okay. Do you notice that they eat together more often, or do they kind of just rush eat more often?
That I actually don't know. I don't know if they choose to do it one way or another. And I imagine that it will depend on their schedule as well as the crew member themselves.
True. I've seen some times where they have an experiment that's too vital that kind of bleeds over into their lunchtime, and so their lunchtime is pushed to a different time, and it doesn't overlap with other crew members.
Yeah, so they don't always eat together.
So they don't always. And I was just curious on what they do in those instances. I'm assuming they just they rehydrate their package, go do some work, come get their package, eat along the way. So
just a normal day at the office.
Just a normal day.
I've had those days.
It's just crazy. I noticed, some astronauts, when I was talking to them, sometimes they just take that stuff for granted, right? Like, I forget who was saying it, but this is not necessarily food, but obviously, you're floating your food over on the side and working, and you're not really thinking about it. But your food is floating right next to you. It's just, I guess you eventually you get in a groove, and you're up there for so long that you just there was one astronaut talking about working out, and the ARED, the Advanced Resistive Exercise, the thing that simulates weightlifting,
right?
It's positioned right, I guess, if you were looking at the configuration of the International Space Station above the cupola.
Okay.
So when you're working out and doing bench presses, you just see the Earth right down, like
it's a beautiful sight
above you. I guess it depends. And they're taking it for granted. They're like, oh man, this workout's really hard.
There's Earth again.
And there's Earth. Oh, I've seen that one before.
Right.
I'm sure that not all of them are like that, but there comes a point where you're doing the same thing. They're working out 2.5 hours a day, every single day. So eventually, things get a little bit more repetitive, and I can understand it, but still very, very cool.
Very cool. They work out a lot, so they have to eat a lot.
They
eat a lot more than you would on Earth. So.
Oh, they do. Their calories are increased.
They have more calories on average, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're working out so much, and then also it takes a little bit of energy to stay upright in zero gravity. We take for granted that when we sit in the chair, we're going to be sitting upright, whereas they're constantly bobbing and weaving.
That's
and so
true.
They have to exert that energy to stay upright.
There's no real sitting, right? They kind of hook their feet underneath one of those handrails,
right?
And then they have to. Yeah, you're right. They're bobbing, and because they're not going to stay in one position unless they kind of get their footing right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Huh. Do you notice that they come down? I guess this is kind of subjective, but do they come down in better shape than they went up, or worse shape, or how does that change?
It kind of depends on the person. So NASA, in general, they take the health of the astronaut very seriously. And so that is part of the reason why they work out so much. That's to combat muscle loss as well as bone loss.
Sure.
And so they probably work out more than they would maybe on Earth, depending on the person. Mm-hmm. We try to make sure that their food is nutritionally sound. So if you're someone who's not constantly paying attention to your diet before going into space, it'll be an improvement for you. Mm-hmm. But a lot of them are already very health conscious. So it really depends on the person and what state they were in before. But in general, we don't notice those changes as much as we used to in the past. So.
I guess that's good, right? Because then there's not really negative effect. Well, you're you have countermeasures against those negative
Right,
effects,
right.
So you're eating healthy, you're exercising regularly, so you come down and
make sure that you're in reasonably good health when you come back, and that's an overall mission of the space program, to make sure that there aren't lasting effects of going into space. And obviously, the more that we have astronauts in space, the more we learn, and we try to combat those effects. But it's
right, and the International Space Station is perfect for that, right?
Yes.
It's like a big, it's a laboratory that you get to practice this over and over, and then if you go do another mission, then you're well prepared because you have all of this data collected from the International Space Station.
Right.
Very cool. All right, well, Takia, I think that's about all the time we have. For the listeners, if you want to know more, have a suggestion on what we should talk about, stay tuned until after the music to learn how to submit those ideas. Takia, thank you so much for coming on. Always a pleasure talking to you. Space food is one of my favorite things to talk about. And I know we were just talking beforehand, but we might have to do another episode on the history of space food.
That would be very interesting.
Awesome. Yes. Okay, and I'm sure there's more, so we'll do another episode. But thank you again. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Stop of the space shuttle.
Roger, 0J, and I feel fine.
Shuttle has cleared the tower.
For all mankind.
It's actually a huge honor to break a record like this.
Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Never keeps to. Welcome to space.
Hey, thanks for sticking around. So today we talked with Dr. Takia Sermons about space food. And the space food that they make is mostly, right now, well, almost entirely, for the International Space Station. And you can see some of the pictures that some of the astronauts share of the food that they're eating on the International Space Station by going to nasa.gov/ISS. We have a lot of blog posts and photos that we release regularly. Some of them are about space food, but you can also learn what's going on aboard the International Space Station, like what experiments they're doing and some of the latest updates on what's being done aboard. On social media, we're very active. On Facebook, it's International Space Station, Twitter @space_station, and on Instagram is @ISS. If you use the hashtag AskNASA on any one of those platforms and submit an idea or maybe a question for the show, we'll make sure to address it in a later episode of Houston, We Have a Podcast. This podcast was recorded on July 5th, 2017. Thanks to Alex Perryman, John Stoll, and Bill Jeffs. And thanks again to Dr. Takia Sermons for coming on the show. We'll be back next week.